Hey fourth graders, you just got done watching this video about input-output tables. So now I'm going to do a quick think aloud for you on how to solve an input-output and figure out the missing information. So when I first look at this input-output table, I notice three different things. I notice it gives me my input. I notice it gives me a rule. It also gives me a few example outputs, but the big thing I noticed down here is I've got some missing information in this input-output. So my job now as the mathematician is to figure out what's going in the missing boxes. Now, we already know from that video we just watched, the rule is going to stay the same for the entire table. So I already know my rule for these bottom two boxes. It's going to be plus 4. So that's pretty easy. I just fill in plus 4. Then what I do is I imagine a 4 going into the machine. That 4 is then going to add 4 more, and my output is going to be 8. I input a 5. My 5 gets 4 more added to it. The output is a 9. Okay, so it's pretty simple. You just have to fill in the rule and then determine the output. So let's do another example. On this input-output, I notice that it gives me my input and a few outputs, but now it's my job to determine the rule. I don't know what this rule is going to be. One thing I notice is if I go over to my input, 1, and I compare it to my output, 8, I notice that my number gets larger. If my number gets larger, I'm going to ask myself two things. Is it going to be addition or multiplication? Because the only way a number will get larger is if I'm doing those two operations. So I need to ask myself, is it addition or is it multiplication? If it's addition, it has to be the same for all of these options. So I'm just going to guess and check. Let's see what would happen if I wanted to put addition in this box. I'm going to ask myself, what number do I have to add to go from 1 to 8? Well, I notice 1 plus 7 equals 8. Okay. Now I have to check to see if my rule plus 7 works with the other information that I was given. I was given 2 and the output 16. So I have to ask myself, is 2 plus 7 16? I think to myself, no, 2 plus 7 is 9. So my output should be 9. Since it's not 9, I know that plus 7 is not my rule. So I can erase that. And then over here I can cross out, it's not going to be addition. So now I have to try multiplication. I have to think to myself, what number times 1 will get me 8? Well, I know 1 times 8 equals 8. So now I have to check with the second input. If I input a 2, 2 times 8 is 16. That's a true statement, so I'm going to keep checking. 3 times 8 is 24. Another true statement. So now I feel pretty confident that my rule is going to be times 8. So now I can fill in my rule down here. 4 times 8 is 32. Fill in my rule. 5 times 8 is 40. And I'm done. Let's look at this option. In this scenario, I notice it gives me my input, it gives me a rule, it gives me the output. So now all I have to do is fill in the information. Okay, I already know my rule is minus 7. So then I just ask myself, what's 13 minus 7? I know that it's 6. And again, 14 minus 7, I know that it's 7. Okay, pretty simple. Now I notice my rule is missing. So I have to ask myself, what do I notice about my input and the output? If I look closely, I notice that my 8 goes down to a 4, which means my number is getting smaller. If my number is getting smaller, I have to think, what two operations could I possibly use that will make my number smaller? I know that we could use subtraction, or we could use division. Okay, so I'm going to guess and check with the two operations that I know. I'm going to try subtraction first. So I'm going to think 8 minus what number will get me the output of 4. I know that 8 minus 4 is 4. So now I'm going to try it with the second input number. 10 minus 4. I know that 10 minus 4 is 6, but my output is 5, which means I'm not able to subtract 4. That rule does not work for that table. So I can erase that rule. I can cross off that I tried subtraction and it doesn't work. So now I'm going to try division. Now I got to think 8 divided by what number is 4? I know 8 divided by 2 is 4. So now I got to check with the second input. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So it's worked with 2 of them so far. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So now I can feel pretty confident that my rule is divide by 2. So now all I have to do is fill in my rule and finish this sentence. 14 divided by 2 is 7. And 16 divided by 2 is 8. Now my